All right. Well, whenever it connects, we should be live. I think. Yeah, there we go. We're live. All right. Hey, everybody, if we could just get a quick confirmation from the chat to let us know we're coming in loud and clear. You can hear and see us. That's very appreciated. I see Maganani, Combi Bob, Aquarius 22, Rib Louis, Celtic Sun 57, and Tom B Man is in the chat. Hey everybody, thanks for being here. Awesome. We got a 5-5 from Maganoni. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about today's show, and I'm really excited to introduce you guys to a new friend of mine who I'm really enjoyed spending time with and getting to know better, because she is just an absolute wealth of knowledge in so many different areas. This show, we're going to be talking about human design, which is definitely an area of her expertise. You know, she's been studying this for quite a bit, and it shows just in the depth of knowledge that she has on the subject, but also within her space. So this is Lila. This is Lila. We're very grateful to have her, but she's also a whiz at all things body work and looking into all these different healing modalities. She truly is a very caring, healing, beautiful soul that loves to just show up and share all that she has and all that she can in all the different ways. So we're always very appreciated to have her. And so thank you, Lila, for being here today and for joining us. So with that, I'll just kind of pass it off to you to see if you have any opening comments or topics or things you want to get into before we jump right into the show today.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here and to speak with a larger audience. I have really enjoyed being part of this crew, and I'm so delighted to be here and be talking about human design. It's really something that has become something that's really become over the years. And I stress saying over the years because it's taken me a long time to believe in it, because I'm actually kind of a natural skeptic. And I'm going to go a little bit into my chart just to explain that I'm also what Justin is. I'm what's called an investigator in my personality type. And so when I learn about things, I'm usually very skeptical, and then I go through a process that sometimes takes 10, 20, 30 years to really know what it is. So for me, human design was introduced to me probably about 13 years ago. And it took a long time for me to learn about it and settle into it and do what's called deconditioning. We talk about this beauty of learning about your design and then spending about a 7-year period as a decondition period. And that's where you're sort of really settling into how your design shows up in your life wherever you're at, and then also how you work with other people, show up with other people, etc. So for me, I am one type, and I basically, had been taught by other types to be a certain way. And that's usually the case for most people. So a lot of times there's a period of deconditioning, and that's been true for me. And so now I'm at 13 years. I consider myself fairly deconditioned. And sometimes I can tell at this point what types other people are, maybe what their personality types are, etc. So I've gotten better and better at being able to do DIY work on myself around this. And I encourage everybody to feel really free and open to getting the information from many sources. So I'm just one person who loves to nerd out on it and found a lot of healing in my own life because of the information. And I nerd out on it, and that's how I know as much as I know at this point, and that can be you. So feel free. There's tons of information online, and it's really important to have maybe readings from different people, because even though we all have the basic information and it's all the same for us, every reading you're ever going to get, even if it's from the same human design person, is going to be different. So it's really powerful to just be open to lots of input from lots of different people. And you may have somebody who's more focused in the business realm. Like one of my mentors is incredible. She works with CEOs of big companies, etc. And she's really incredible in working with business. And then other people are looking at, oh, what are the dynamics between family members or whatever. So there's lots of places where this can illuminate your life. And so for me, that's kind of been the story, my narrative around it. And I think I'm going to just dive right in after that. I do want to say that I'm going to be talking, you'll probably hear me mention through the session my clients. I'm actually a body worker of many years. I'm a mom and I'm a body worker, and I'm Lila. And so when I'm speaking of my clients, it's usually my body work clients. This has been something that I do just for fun and now do professionally, but I've only been doing it professionally probably for about 5 years now, I think, or something. So I just do it because I love it. And I started giving clients, mostly some family members or friends, readings, and people just really resonated with the readings. And that was how I came to even do this. I call myself kind of an accidental human design person, because I never really set out to do readings. So bear with me. I'm also very circuitous. So also please bear with me on that one. I may come back around to some things or branch off into some things.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thanks for that. Thanks for the introduction, Lila, on just kind of giving us an idea on who you are, and how you came into this process. So just for everyone who's curious about like what is human design, you've never heard this term before, I'll give kind of my definition, and then I want to pass it back to you, Lila, just for a definition of like what would you say is human design to anyone who has never heard of that before. So just from my perspective, having limited access or limited exposure to this knowledge, I came upon this kind of stuff a few years ago, dove into it a decent amount, and then kind of set it aside after that point. But every time that I have picked it up, so what it is essentially, it's this modality of how we can see our different energy types and how we show up in this realm, and how, like, what our initial blueprint was when we entered into this space. And obviously there are a lot of epigenetic environmental factors that kind of add to our story and add to our personality and who we are. So that always has to be considered on top of this. But this gives an initial kind of like starting point to show, okay, this is how I best operate within other people's spaces. This is why I'm attracted to working with certain individuals. This is why I work well in these areas, but not so much in these other areas. Whereas when we have societal's push of, you go to school and everyone's taught to be a square and you have to fit in this box and you have to do these sorts of things, it doesn't always work for everybody in that capacity. It doesn't work for a lot of people in that capacity. So this is it's a beautiful modality to look into, because it not that we need permission to be as we are, but it helps to just have an insight into how I show up into this world and how I best work and operate. Acknowledging that we all have different gifts and talents, we all have different ways that we can interact with this space. And so when we can navigate that in flow and recognizing where my gifts and my talents can fit in, then I can flow into working with other people who have different but complementary aspects within how they operate, so that we can all create a beautiful team together. It's not that any one type or anything is better than another. It's finding out, how do we fit together to make this collaborative effort work in the best way possible. So it's very similar to, astrology, where astrology, there's no sign that's better or worse than anybody. This is all about just finding out how we show up into this space, and where do my unique talents come into play? Where does my initial sort of way that I operate within this space, how does it fit in a way that I'm operating in flow and not trying to fight against my natural tendencies? So that's kind of my best summation of what human design is, but I'd love to pass it off to you to say just and generally someone who's never heard that term before, how would you define that to them if you want to add anything to what I just said?
Yeah. That's great. Everything that you said, plus I would just add that for me, and for others that I've worked with, that oftentimes looking at it as a very mechanical structure is very helpful. That it's like, here's a Porsche, you lift up the engine and you look at all the pieces under the hood, and you've got, the engine. I mean, you lift up the hood and you look at all the pieces. You've got the engine, you've got the battery, you've got all the things. When you're looking at it from like an engineer's, or, especially like a structural engineer's point of view, it's really how energy moves through the physical, in all ways, certainly energetic, emotional, etc. It's all attached. So it's really how is this being structured? And for me, I do lots of different kinds of body work, but I'm a rolfer, and that's actually exactly what I work with when I'm working with the body. What's going on with this specific structure? So this is a way of looking at your blueprint with a very keen sense of what is the structure, and what is the structure and how is the energy moving through the structure, and then how does that work in different environments. And you said why I might get along with somebody or whatever, but also the other way around too, why we just may seem to have a repulsion to certain people, certain energies, or even certain situations, because we literally, just like all things in this realm, have a very specific blueprint that is very structural. So for me, that's what was different. I do respect astrology, and of course this information comes from Eastern Western astrology, the I Ching, these kind of very old Eastern esoteric teachings, and sacred geometry. So very physical, structural way of looking at this realm. And I really love to nerd out on that part of it. So for me, just knowing that this is a little bit different than the especially Western astrology, if you've had it, or Vedic astrology. Some of us have had those types of readings. It just resonated more. I'm a very like structural being, I'm very hardy. My body likes to touch people and do work with my hands, etc. So when I had this shared with me originally, it just resonated so much, and it explained so many like very physical things, almost like as if I was in an engineering class and somebody was just explaining, oh, this is how we build a Porsche. It's like, oh, I did not know that, or whatever it is. So I hope that can be helpful, that people will see that, this is in that realm, this is teaching them in maybe a different way than they've ever looked at their system before. And I love it's human design system. We're just looking at these systems of operations that are put together to create this blueprint. Also, we're going to be very mindful around not making this a cage or something that limits us in any way. It is really just more information. And if anything in here doesn't ring true for you, or you see it a different way or whatever, that's fine. Oftentimes it may, but I'm always interested to hear if it doesn't and when it doesn't, because that's just more information. Ra, who created the work, that's the name of the person, basically the man who created human design in the last century. No, I'm just kidding. in the 90s, it was basically channeled over a period of time. I did not know that when I was exposed originally to human design, and I probably would have been even more skeptical of it if I knew the story of the origins, personally, just me. So it was interesting to get that information later in my studies with it, because I had a very similar experience with Ida Rolf. Ida Rolf actually did the work on herself, but she claims, as do many other amazing teachers and healers of the past, that that work came to her through inspired light, just information downloading into her system over a pretty small period of time. So it's very similar to Rolfing, and actually weirdly many other things that I've studied. I never knew when I studied those things that it was going to be, or that they had been received in that way. I thought, oh, this person came to it, I don't know what the story is. And it was always kind of shocking to later understand. And I have to be honest, most of the things that I gravitate towards are things that have come through in that way. I don't know, could just be me, but that it seems to be the things that really resonate with me and stand true and explain it to my, westernized American female person of the United States, or not person, being of the United States, in this realm of time space. These things are the things that have made sense to me. So that being said, I love to, when I started reading with somebody, I'd like to say a little poem. It's quite beautiful. And it's just a good reminder around, the information that you're going to be hearing today. Oh, and I will also say we chose to work with Justin here because people were asking about his chart, and we thought this would be a nice way for everybody to see, oh, what does it look like, sort of dissect the chart and learn about it in a really relaxed manner. So that's why we're working with Justin today. But again, do your own work, and feel free to be in touch with me if you have like even the craziest question. I love to nerd out on this, like sometimes at 2 a.m. That's all everybody knows. So, just ask me any questions. Feel free to reach out. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. It's a poem called "A Life for a Life." I heard it when I was in high school, I believe, and it's just always been something that really resonated with me, but especially around the information that people receive while they're getting this work. So it's called "A Life for a Life" by Dina Maria Moloch-Craig. And it goes like this. Oh, the comfort, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but to pour them all out just as they are, chaff and grain together, knowing that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keep what is worth keeping, and then, with a breath of kindness, blow the rest away. So, just this idea, take what fits, what feels good, what's helpful, and with the breath of kindness, just blow the rest away. And enjoy being involved in this experiment, because this is really an experiment, a channeled information, yes, and a very specific way of explaining things. And also we don't think of this as a belief system in that way. We think of this as an experiment that's expanding with every person that's involved, just like what we're working with in every other way. Each person that is involved can give feedback and participate in this grand experiment of the human design.
Yeah, beautifully said. And that was something that really stood out to me when I first started speaking with Lila about this kind of stuff, and just how much I appreciated having that kind of disclaimer put out there, because this is a tool. This is a tool that can help us to learn better about how we operate. But just like any tool, if you use it as a trap or as a limit, it can be just that. So if you find something that doesn't resonate, if you find something that doesn't fit, just remember that this is just one aspect of who you are. This is just like your starting point. And as I mentioned, the environmental factors that play into how you developed and how you transitioned into your life can have a big effect on how you are now. So this is just kind of one way to look at it. And as she said, it is an experiment. And so the more that we kind of all learn about these kind of things and talk about, hey, this really makes a lot of sense to me, this doesn't at all, then that adds to this collective learning experience as we learn and grow about ourselves. I mean, we're all just trying to know thyself. That's the whole, really the whole point of this experience, is to know thyself. And so this is just another way to get further insight into this process. And it has been very valuable for me. And I know for so many others who have looked into it, it has been very valuable as well. That's why I was so excited to share it, and I was really happy that Lila was willing and wanting to hop on and do this. So I'm very grateful for her time and her willingness to hop on and do this. So yeah, just wanted to say that as well. But I did want to also say that, nothing takes away from the work that we talk about in all our other teachings, which is that, we can look out there for all these different things. Nothing takes away from going within and finding that peace and that stillness to really, that's how you self-examine. That's how you really find all these things. And then these out there aspects can resonate and ring true, but only when I'm willing to go within and truly look at myself in that capacity. If I'm still lying about myself in different ways, if I'm not being honest in how I'm showing up, then of course it doesn't really matter how many different modalities or whatever things I look at. It all is revolving around this internal work, which is everything. So let this be a tool to utilize to further add to your repertoire on doing that internal work. But don't let it take away from that aspect as well. So thank you, Lila. That was very well said.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. Yeah, I hope that can only be used for good and light and illumination in people's lives. Absolutely. Great. Well, throw your chart up. Let's get
All right.
started.
So we'll just jump right in. So probably for the duration of the show, I'm just going to have my screen pulled up so Lila can go through it. And then we'll just be going over what a human design chart looks like and how it shows up. So let me know if you can see everything okay. I'm gonna pull yeah. So I can't really see the chat right now, just FYI everybody. So we'll just be doing our best here, but yeah, so you can see everything. You're good with the screen?
Yep, looks great.
All right, perfect. So periodically, I might, as you're going through this, I might chime in and just say how this kind of relates to me, since this is my chart. I want to just draw on some comparisons within my life that kind of demonstrate that this is a pretty accurate way to portray how I've showed up and what things have revealed themselves throughout my experience. And that's the wonderful thing about doing this, is you don't necessarily have to learn about this to realize that this is how we're wired. But it's like so that's why I do this in that way. Oh, so that's why this doesn't fit in this kind of area. And so it just helps to piece everything together. At least that's what it has been for me. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, me too. And again, I'm sort of an empath, very sensitive. I have been since I was young. And personally, the biggest way that this has helped me is that it has supported me in not taking things personally. I have a design that is really meant to take things personally and is sensitive in that way, because I was made to do what I do. And that's been something I've really struggled with in my life. Just around being, kind of a snowflake in some areas. And, that serves me when I'm, have my hands on and I'm doing 2 hours of cranial sacral or whatever. I need my electrical system to be that sensitive. So it feels like my hands are doing x-rays and MRIs into people's brains, etc. But it has been challenging, in other ways in my life. So learning, knowing, understanding this has helped me to just not take probably 97% less in my life personally, and that's been very helpful to me. Okay, so we've got Justin Carpenter. Firstly, we're just going to go over the date. We always want to check the date just to make sure, because people can give you their information or you can type things in wrong. So we've got March 8th, 1990, 1:34 a.m., birthplace Memphis, Tennessee, the United States. That's all good, right, Justin? Okay.
Yep.
And for anybody who wants to DIY this, you can just get on to jovianarchive.com. There's a tab that says get your chart and you enter that information in. If your town or village is small, sometimes it won't come up onto the chart, and then you just want to put whatever town that's maybe a little bit bigger near you, put that in, and then usually it will find it. It doesn't seem to be really an issue as much in the United States, but definitely when you're in other places in the world, it's not quite as detailed. So you can go ahead and put your information in and you'll get something that looks like this. And look at that beautiful design. It's really, I just love to always kind of look at it and sit with it a minute with a soft gaze and sort of appreciate each person's design. And it does remind me of the snowflakes. You know, we are all our own little snowflakes, and it's really quite special. And I kind of hate how that word or term has become vilified, because, you know, we're just all so beautiful in our own beautiful, innate, stunning, illuminating way. So we've got this lovely person, lovely being, projector. He's called what's called a projector. And I'm going to go through the types briefly. Justin has touched on them, but in case you're finding this and you haven't really heard, I'm going to very briefly go through the different types in human design. And that way you can kind of start to understand this. Also, I want to say we're going to be doing sort of it's actually probably going to be a longer conversation, but you'll see I'm just scratching the surface of most of the general information in this reading that we're going to do today. So from my experience and when I'm working with people now, I oftentimes will see that you have sort of a general conversation to begin with. That will usually takes, you know, about an hour and a half or two if you're, you know, getting a reading from somebody or giving one. And then you might go down the rabbit hole of the snowflake and proceed. And you really can, I think my longest reading at one time has been like 6.5 hours or something. So you can really, there's so much more to the chart than just what we're going to go over today. I mean, people study this for their life. There are people that have been studying this for, you know, well, Ra has been studying it since it came to him in you know, in this flash of information. So you know that these are very general things basically that I'm going to be talking about today, and then there's so much more, and you can explore at, you know, at your discretion. So the types, we have these different types. This is basically how your auric field works. And, you know, if auric field doesn't work for some people, it's too whatever, throw that out and just say energy system. Okay. We all have energy systems, whether it's a carrot in the ground or it's just in here, you know, it's like, we all have that. There's ways that things work here. So this is the way that your energy works, and there are these specific types. Firstly, we have a projector. A projector has an aura that takes in and then projects out. So it oftentimes makes energy bigger. They're wonderful metabolizers of especially current culture. They take things in and then they usually create amazing ways to share that, and things that are oftentimes much bigger. For instance, an artist or a singer, songwriter who goes through experiences and then writes an amazing song that affects, you know, millions of people or whatever. The second type is called a generator. And the generator is basically there's actually two types of generators. There's a pure generator, and then there's what's called a manifesting generator. If you are a manifesting generator, you are still a generator. You just have certain attributes that are similar and in tandem to a manifestors, but it's you're still a generator. A lot of people who are new to human design have that question. And so I just want to say clearly, you're still a generator, you still work the way generators do, but you can be called a manifesting generator. So we call those pure generators, and we call those manifesting generators. Generators have an open and magnetic aura. They take energy in, and then they also are able to self-generate this energy within their system if it's something that they're super excited about. The problem is when that isn't the case, but these tend to be like the worker bees of society. It's about 70% of the population, 35-35 is sort of how it's broken down. And so most of the people that you meet are probably going to be generators. It's just the numbers right now. I will say that we're seeing more projectors be born now. And so it seems like the generator numbers are sort of diminishing maybe a little bit, and that more projectors are being born. And certainly I think, well, at least in my own experience, a lot of millennials that I do readings for, I'm seeing a lot more of those people be projectors. So the next type that we have is the manifester. The manifester is like 8%, maybe 9% of the population. Oh, by the way, the projector is like 20-ish right now. So the manifester is about 8 to 9, depending on where you're getting the numbers from. And they have a closed auric field, and they are really put here to manifest. So they have to have a bit of a closed auric field, and it's impenetrable. I see it as like an armadillo, it's like they have these things that have to protect them so they can waddle around and get their work done. And manifestors tend to be the system regulators. They make the rules. I would think that some of the people that are involved in some of the higher up hierarchy that isn't really working for society at this point are a lot of those people are manifestors, actually. But a lot of amazing people are manifestors too. So it's both. And then the last type that we have is called a reflector. A reflector is very rare. They're about 1 to 2% of the population right now. And reflectors it's in the name, they really reflect back. They have a very open auric field, and their whole purpose is to be in this realm and reflecting back the systems around them. So whether that's societal system, family system, whatever it is, they're here, and they give, they're quite amazing people, and they oftentimes have a bit of an etheric quality to them, because they don't have as a personality maybe in the same way that some of the other designs do. And so they really are often etherically reflecting back even words, but oftentimes situations, etc., to the people around them. All of the types are meant to work with each other in synergistic combination, to move to move energy, to be in this realm. And so we don't want to glorify any of the types. Each type has its amazing lovely traits, and then some that are maybe a little bit more tricky to deal with, but definitely we need all of those types to work together and work with each other. Now, I will say this is why sometimes when you might meet somebody, it's like it either clicks or maybe it doesn't. And the type relationships can often explain that. Oftentimes, somebody who has an open auric field is really going to resonate with somebody else who has an open and auric field. Or, two manifestors who both are, their train is going that way and their train's going that way. They're oftentimes going to repel each other because they're just not able to focus on each other's situation long enough to create got a lot of longevity. So knowing that you know, that this is how this works and the way our energy is either taking in or repelling or whatever may be very helpful to any of us, because it actually you know, gives everybody sort of a get out of jail free card around you know, yes, let's be mindful, but then also let's look, how does my energy work in this situation? And maybe that's just not the best match for us to, for instance, do this project together or be in a relationship together, or maybe it is, right? Do you have anything to say about that as far as your own projectorness?
Well, I mean, it certainly does show up in different ways on, you know, just in my experience of being around people, and some I'm very drawn to working with and continuing, and others you can't really explain. It's not like they do anything necessarily that's bad or wrong, but it's just like there's something about the way working with them that just doesn't vibe. And so just being open to that, and not necessarily just fighting through it and pushing through it, and but truly acknowledging that, like, oh, okay, well, it probably just means that our energy types are not in sync, and there's nothing wrong with that. But God is all about flow, right? So this whole creation is all about flow. So if I'm resistant to that flow, if I'm trying to fight against it and force things to happen, then, you know, I'm resistant to all that is natural, and that natural flow that he gives us. So this is just another tool to give insight into what energy am I in flow with, and how can I work well, so that I'm not always trying to fight upriver or trying to fight, you know, upstream to doing things that I'm not necessarily fitting with. So yeah, it's very helpful, you know. And I think this is something that the more that people do learn about and are able to utilize and just have as a part of their repertoire for dealing, it really can help with just determining people that we can work well with, and not that this is the end all be all. And again, don't let this be a limit, but it is an indicator to help give some more insight into that. So it's not just, we're not just shooting blindly kind of thing.
Right. And also, so we're not, you know, we can, if we recognize that we need each of these types, and we need to work in a synergistic way, we also can really actually work better with that specific type's energy. So that's what I meant by that get out of jail free card. It kind of lets people off the hook in a very healthy way of like expecting them to be who you want them to be or who you are, and instead accepting that's the way their energy works. I'm not going to ask a Porsche to be a bus, you know, a school bus, you know, they're different machines and they have very different uses. And so we start to just, for me, I became more forgiving of people, you know, I really became, I could just see it. And all of a sudden I wasn't asking, for instance, a reflector who often, a reflector tends to have less energy than some of the other types, certainly less than a generator. I'm what's called a manifesting generator. So a manifesting generator can be pretty intense and fiery, and like they're like the Energizer bunny that just goes if they're excited about what they're doing. I mean, that's why I could do like a 6.5 hour, you know, session with somebody. But you know, a reflector cannot, you know, they're like, okay, I had 45 minutes worth of information. That's good. I'm going to go back and sit with that for a month and I'll get back to you. Right. And I'll reflect that back to you, actually. How good was your reading? How did you talk? Maybe you're too fast or too slow. I mean, they're just beautiful, right? So I'm going to choose reflectors in ways that are going to just naturally uplift them and allow them to be that, instead of, you know, wanting to hire a reflector to be my house cleaner. You know, it's just like, it's just probably not going to be a good relationship. So we can really start to, you know, hone in on the way that we work, the way that other people's machines work, and then work with that energy instead of asking it to be something that it just simply is not and will never be. Yeah. So next, we're going to go down to the strategy. The strategy for a projector, every type has their own strategy. So we're going to be focusing really on what's going on with Justin and his chart now. And the strategy for the projector is to wait for the invitation. It's very important that a projector is very patient and very open to information coming to them, but that they don't try to initiate or manifest something into happening. The way the energetic field works is that something comes in. I mean, think of this as far as like magnetism, right? In this situation, the magnet sits and waits, and then when the right magnet comes in that is the right polarity and they comes in, they click together, then that's when the project, whatever the exchange is that needs to happen, can move forward. And this can be a little tricky because again, this isn't really most of society. So oftentimes projectors can be seeing what the rest of society is doing and maybe how easy it is to manifest or initiate for other energy types, and they kind of want to be that. they and partially just maybe they, you know, they were taught, oh, you can, you know, you can manifest anything, and a projector can create anything. I'm totally in agreement with that, but they don't manifest the way, for instance, a manifester does. It's a different energetic quality there. So the projector really needs to be still, sit and wait for invitations to come. When the invitation comes, you may or may not choose to take it. Hopefully, while you're waiting, you've been fine-tuning and honing your own skills, really becoming centered and aligned, so that when the invitation comes, you can trust some of these other things that you have in your chart to help you read the situation and make a decision as to whether you want to take the invitation up or not. You're not always going to want to act on that invitation. That's a really important thing to know. So the projector may or may not take the invitation, and then they're going to, when they do that, they will have started a movement. Let me back up. Not started. They will have participated and responded to a movement, an invitation that then therefore will be aligned energetically and has more likelihood to carry through, right, to some type of end or creation or whatever needs to happen. So this can be an issue in human design in general if you aren't working with your strategy in the way that your energy works, and you're trying to be something other than, the energy gets all crossed up, just like in true energy, magnetic or otherwise. Like, you know, it gets confused. It can be jarring. You can get distracted. People get confused, or they think you're one person and then they come back later and say, I thought you were, you know, who are you? I don't even know who you are. Well, if you haven't really been living your design, living all of these things, including the strategy, then what ends up happening is you aren't really who you are. And that can be very shocking to people, and may sometimes even come across as bipolar or fake or surface or whatever. So we want to really be working with the way the energy works for our design and starting to decondition ourselves if in fact that hasn't been the way. Because for instance, Justin, you might have been raised by a, you know, a pure generator who wants you to get up and work hard and work on the farm. I don't know if you know really about your past as far as that goes, but something like that, because generators can be very hard workers, and in fact they oftentimes need to work to expel all of that energy that they're generating. That's a very different life than a projector lives. A projector has a very specific amount of energy every day. They need to wait for the invitation, and the energy that they have needs to go to very specific things. It can't be sort of just generated the way that it is for the other, some of the other energy types. So, you know, and then you have your dad or you have somebody in your life saying, why can't you do this? You just need to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps or work harder, or, all the things that a lot of us hear, because we do have a society that's mostly generators or manifestors. And that can be, really hard to hear, and something that somebody's always working to attain, that, maybe is just not really what their energy is capable of in that way. Now, that being said, as a projector, you have the ability to project out. It's really like a projector, right, on a screen. So the beauty of it is that the way the projector works is it takes it in, it kind of, all the information metabolizes, everything is sort of working, and especially in your chart, which we'll get into a little bit later, some of the other things you especially have that going on. So that's all kind of going in. And then when it comes out of a projector, oh my God, if it's aligned, it is big and it's powerful and it's bold, and it's like can reach the masses in the way that most things can't. And that, is very, very aligned with like Hollywood film, musicians, etc. Like there are things that we can hear and resonate with that say so much more than a 6-hour conversation or whatever, and so there's a real power in the projector. It's just different than the worker bee energy of the generator.
Yeah, and that's been huge in my life, of just, anytime that anyone's tried to like micromanage me and really monitor the amount of work that I do, if they're comparing it to that kind of like hustle and bustle, always grinding, kind of doing stuff, they're always kind of like, what, this is how little you do, or this is the amount of time you spend on doing these kind of things. And but anyone so just thinking of like my corporate career and that kind of stuff, but anyone who's left me alone in that space, I mean, I do, I get everything done above and beyond what needs to be done, but I don't really have that same method of just like, I'm going to come in here and work all these different crazy hours. I never saw the point of like overtime or working past what was needed to, or any of that. And so if I had managers that recognized me for what I did bring and just allowed me in that space to be as I am, in their eyes, I thrived, and I did thrive. But when I had those managers that were really trying to like make me be that worker bee, there was always a conflict, because I knew that's not how I operated. I knew that's not how I showed up. And so I was going to be very resistant and counter to anyone who tried to make me be like that. But it would give this appearance of like, oh, Justin's just kind of lazy, or he just doesn't want to do this kind of stuff. Like, why doesn't he work as hard as other people? And so it does show up in that same sort of way. But as I would trust that process, it always did move me into the spaces that I needed to go. And as long as I didn't try and force anything, that invitation always came. And so as long as I waited for that, things always worked out. They always did. They worked out exactly when they needed to, always in those right opportunities. And I knew just exactly when I needed to shift and when I needed to move and how I needed to go about it. And I didn't really have always a rhyme or reason why, when people would ask, like, why are you changing everything right now? Or why are you shifting jobs or whatever? It just made sense. It just always made sense. And I knew I needed to go, and I knew the signs would just line up. And so it's always been beautiful. And then just seeing something like this to just continue to affirm that, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, exactly. It, when did you first hear about human design? How long would you say that you've known about it?
I would say it was probably 2019, maybe the end of 2018 was when I first learned about it. So majority of my life, I had no idea. But
Right.
Yeah. So it's
I was
been,
just going to say that that's interesting. And this is often what I see. And even for myself, when I had my very first reading, what resonated so much was that it told me exactly what I had learned over whatever time, whether you're 20 or whether you're 60, like you have your own experiences, and it really resonated with them for me. And it really is this reality around how do we recognize how to use this energy in a way that is, just going to take us to the higher realm, if, at least in my experience. And so it seems like maybe, and this can also happen, like, say if you were lucky enough to have a projector parent, which you may have. I haven't, we could look at your family at some point. It's really fascinating to look at the family constellation of everybody's chart. It's really fun. But you could have had a projector parent, and then you would have been, unconsciously, in a subtle way, being taught how to be a projector in a way that that person had already experientially learned in this world of generators and manifestors, for the most part, right? So that could be true. Who knows why that information, but what seemed, or I'm sorry, who knows, why you already knew that. But I would say God, and I would say, like, most children, when they're born, they're very true to their design, and it depends on who's around them and who's affecting them, who's telling them how to be a different type, or whatever it may be, right? What's affecting you, and what that's creating then in your own behavior, or and expectations of self, how you have to be in the world. Go ahead.
Yeah, could be. I mean, we'll get into this, I know, in the later aspects of my chart, but it really was just this trial and error kind of figuring things out, and then having this strong assertion of, like, no, I know who I am and I know how I operate, and I don't need you to tell me anything otherwise. I don't buy into anybody telling me how to do things just because that's the way it's always been, or that's just the way, it has to be, or whatever, just because I said so. I never gave into those kind of behaviors, and I've always kind of been a little rebellious in that kind of space. People always liked working with me, but as soon as they crossed the line where they were trying to infringe upon my space, that those very clear ideas on who I am and how I work, then, of course, it got more refined over time through that sort of trial and error process. But I did learn very quickly that I did not want anybody to cross that line. I did not want to put anybody in that space, and I wasn't here to work. Like, even just having jobs, like, it never made sense to me why I'm just doing all this kind of stuff. And it doesn't make sense to most people anyway, doing stuff that they don't love to do. But even more so, it seemed, than most people were able to kind of just get into that rhythm and do stuff in that kind of way. It's like, why am I spending all this time doing this? Like, I want to do so many other things, and why aren't we talking about all this? So yeah, it just kind of, it was a development of just figuring things out as I went. So yeah, it would be interesting to see my family's charts as well, just to know where they are. I don't think any of them are projectors. We did kind of do that a couple years ago, and I don't think any of them are projectors, but I would be curious to go back and look.
Yeah, and you're right. You definitely have more that we're going to get into in the chart that explains, because I do want to say this actually isn't very typical of a projector. A lot of times projectors do deal with feeling very unsure of themselves. And it's probably the hardest type as far as that goes, as far as feeling sort of self-assured. Because the projector is remember, they have that open auric field. So they're taking in whatever is within their auric field, which could be about 1.5 feet around them. So oftentimes projectors can struggle with alcoholism, different dependency issues, because a lot of projectors have to sort of numb themselves to get through life with the rest of us. I think that's slowly changing. And certainly I can understand what you're talking about as far as the feeling lazy in the work part, because a projector, again, they only have a specific amount of energy every day. They've got to be really careful around that. And they can look lazy to people. They need a lot of rest, because all of that stuff is inside them, transforming and in a very subtle realm, working, it's alchemical actually, so this alchemical process is happening, and amazingness comes out of it. But you can't rush alchemy. It's just kind of like it's got to do its job, and that cannot be measured by what's happening in today's society. We are so or we have been, I like to call it the old school reality, although I guess it's like the new school on top of the old school. So I'm going back to the old school personally. So, this reality that's built around, time clocks and how much you make per hour and blah blah blah, you're working 8 hours a day, that reality is very, very hard on a projector. It is, in fact, it can drive them to insanity. And I have seen some projectors who have had that reality. So, I just wanted to mention that for your chart, you have some other things that we're going to go into that give you a little bit of a bolster in that realm of that self-assuredness. But for a lot of projectors, it can be pretty tricky. I did also want to mention that a lot of projectors are people who do these quirky, cool startups, nowadays. It's like, oh, who had that idea to do that, right? And that they're oftentimes computer whizzes. It's like there are people that can create out of the etheric realms. And so they often have these really creative, artistic ideas that they can turn into businesses that, do really well. And then they either sell, or that actually they're able to maintain with, say, working, an hour a day versus 8 hours a day. And again, it's not that you're not working on some level, but it's happening in a different way than it does, for instance, for a manifestor or a generator. So it's just super important, again, just to keep returning back to your own center and recognizing this is, the way my energy works, and I'm going to be okay with that. So again, always using the strategy, wait for the invitation if you're a projector. I'm going to circle down or just skip the not to even go down to the inner authority. You have a little bit more assuredness than some projectors, is because you have what's called a self-projected inner authority. Now, the inner authority is the way your energy moves in your body. Everybody has one. It's going to be different for, there's different categories for different people. And for you, you have the self-projected inner authority. So that means your truth comes from something that you actually project forward and out, much like we're talking about the projector, but in an even stronger way. And this is actually a very rare placement. I think it's like 3% or less of the population that are self-projected projectors. So it's a very special part of your snowflake. And this gives a little bit more assuredness and authority to the projector type, and has made who we all know here, like really you can speak with assurance. You kind of know what you know, and like that's it. Whereas other people, we have different kinds of authority. So for instance, my authority is emotional. My authority, my deep knowingness, comes through actually experiencing emotions. So there's the sensitivity that I mentioned, at the beginning of the conversation. So that's just an example. There can be lots of different ways that the authority shows up, and you've got the self-projected. And we're lucky. And then I'm gonna just skip down to your incarnation cross from there, because that's tied in also with the self-projected inner authority. The incarnation cross is what we've incarnated in this reality to complete or be a part of. And you have what's called the right angle cross of rulership. And that incarnation cross is totally focused on and made for ruling. And it's ruling a family dynamic, it's ruling a business dynamic, it's ruling perhaps, people. It's a very kingly placement, and it really is this energy of the divine king, of how do you show up, and you are working with whatever that system is that you're working with and rule it. And it's just like you're made to do that, and you're here to do that. And it's sort of a bit of a yoke on the shoulders, but I would like to remind everybody that a yoke can be seen as a burden, or something that is really limiting some animal usually. But we talk about the shoulder yoke in Rolfing, and the yoke of the shoulders is what makes this dynamic movement through our shoulder girdle. We need the yoke of the shoulders to be working correctly to move and not have, tendonitis down the back of the arm, or, all of the different things that happen in the body, TMJ issues or whatever. So a yoke for this ruler here, the right angle cross of rulership, is actually something that I would like to believe that you signed up and agreed to participate in. And it is a tremendous weight, but also a tremendous gift, not only for the people that you're serving, the systems that you're ruling and serving and organizing, but also for yourself and your own soul, as far as what you came here to learn and be alchemized by. Everybody has an incarnation cross, and they're all quite interesting. Most people will find that their incarnation cross will feel, it's not a cross like this necessarily. It just means how the energy is actually moving in the chart, right? So we've got this right angle of incarnation. So it really is, it's more of a very physical way that the energy is moving. We're talking about the right angle cross. These two things are crossing, etc. But and you're going to really want to recognize that oftentimes the incarnation cross is going to be something that has really challenged you in your life. It's like you kind of know that you had this thing about this specific thing, and it was, especially earlier in life when we might be more immature, etc., you might have bucked up against a little bit because it felt, like a heavy weight to bear. So it's always kind of an interesting relationship when we find out about our incarnation crosses, because it can be like, oh yeah, I'm here to do that, and it's almost like, I'm here to do that, but yeah, I'm here to do that, oh man, but we just gotta, keep on the right side of the brain, right, with that. I'll speak for myself. I have the left angle cross of shock. So I literally was brought in this world to kind of shock people, like to push people. And, whether it's through body work or this information or really anything in my life, it's like, I'm kind of like always the one that's like, oh, well, like chlorine in a pool, is that really like what we're supposed to swim in? And everybody's like, shut up, who cares? But it's like, I'm here to sort of shock people awake. And that has sort of felt like a heavy weight to bear. And also, it's been my biggest gift once I became friends with it. What do you think? Yeah.
Well, just in sort of combination with this self-projected authority and this incarnation cross, it certainly has presented itself in a lot of different ways, just in that I seem to be a very polarizing character without even really trying. Like people either really enjoy my perspective, and I see things very clearly. I always see things very clearly, and I'm always wanting to share that. I'm always wanting to give that and provide that for people. But if people don't want to receive that, they view that as if I'm this oppressive, sort of like overbearing, sort of I'm dictating, or like I'm forcing my ideas on anybody, which has really encouraged that that strategy of waiting for the invitation in those moments and not coming across as that space. But at the same time, sometimes it doesn't even matter whether or not I'm doing it or telling somebody. I can just be projecting out there in my own space, and that can still, some people will still view that as a threat, as if I'm somehow speaking to them directly, or I'm whatever I'm saying about how I'm living my life or what I found is the best way to go about something, as somehow I'm being critical, or as somehow I'm telling somebody what they're doing is wrong. And I'm not, I would never want to tell anybody what to do or how to live their life. Like, this is the whole point of everything that I talk about, is just finding that personal responsibility so that we can do all of this. And these are just the ways that I found to be effective. But it sometimes with certain people, it doesn't matter how I say it or what I say, or how it comes, it always comes across as this like, man, that Justin guy, he's just an asshole. Like, he's always trying to just tell me what to do, and he's always telling me I'm doing the wrong things. It's like, what? No, how do you get that about what I just said? Like, I didn't say that at all. But it does continually kind of remind me of like, well, that's how they might see me, and even regardless of how I try, um, that's how it's going to come across. And so it's always a continual refining on like ways that I can smoothen that out and relate with people in the best way possible. But at the end of the day, I just have to continue to be at peace with like, I'm just going to show up as I am, and you can take it or leave it. And so I've just had to continually set that disclaimer out there through different periods of my life. And the more that I have in later years in my life, the more free I have felt to not be so burdened by someone else's perspective who views me in that sort of light. It's like, okay, if you want to think that way about me, have at it. Like, I'm not going to stop you. You can view me as the worst, oppressive, whatever it is, if you want to. I'm not even really speaking about you or to you, but people do like to take things personally. So I very much see that kind of show up in a lot of different ways.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah. People do like to take things personally because they haven't been living their design. They haven't been taught this information. I mean, imagine I have a child and he's a projector actually. And what a gift I have given my projector child to know about these simple ways of energetics. Obviously, he can't understand all of this, but over the years, he's gotten to know it more and more. And he oftentimes can even tell other people's types nowadays when we meet people. So yeah, it's, what a gift this is, so that, we're not taking it personally, they're not taking it personally. And, I can relate to you. I have something similar that's a bit of a queenly line in my own chart. And people just get super irritated with that sometimes. And oftentimes they'll say, oh, she's so holier than thou, or haughty, or, these different things. And this is a great example of that sometimes you just are, and it can rub people the wrong way. And what I will say is that if they have a different chart, they could be rubbing up, say they have a right angle cross of, for instance, there's so many different incarnation crosses, but somebody can have one of rebellion, and they're here to like break down systems, right? And then so they're coming in, and you've got this rulership, and even though this is the best kind of ruler, right? Somebody who's really doing the interior work so that they do not become crazy and drunk on their own ruling, right? And so we can see with you, at least I feel like I can see with you, a very measured approach to being that person, but still it's gonna just sometimes energetically rub up against other people. So then you have this information, and it's not that you are dismissive in any way or something, but you might just have a little bit more of a light to shine in. Oh, why is this particular situation or relationship just always feeling like there's this friction, right? And then a great ruler can work with a great rebel, right? If they're working together as a team. So it can then transform the relationship, which is so beautiful and sounds like something you've mastered to an extent. I'm sure you'll keep fine-tuning that. So let's hop back up to the not self theme. Yep. So every type has a not self theme. And basically this means that there's a emotional theme that plays itself out in situations when we are not being true to our human design. There can be, there are many different emotions, but for the projector, there can be a lot of bitterness. And bitterness will always be the not self theme for the projector. So now I want to be clear, the not self theme does not mean like, oh, I'm striving to never experience that emotion. It's more that that emotion is a teacher, an indicator, a red or green flag, that's letting you know if energy is moving correctly or if it's not. So if you're in a situation and you're feeling bitter about something, then that means that somewhere along the line, you maybe, are trying to do a project with a type that's just not working, that it's just like we we're talking about, just, you've got your issues for all of these reasons. I mean, you can see how complicated it can get because these are just the general things. And all of these reasons can bump up against each other for specific people. So if you're feeling bitterness about a situation, it's sort of like, oh, shining a light, here's this emotion coming up around this. Now, do I do things to rectify the relationship, which could look like many different strategies? For instance, you may bring, if you're bumping up against, say, a manifestor who's trying to rule you, which would be especially an issue for you because you have the right angle cross of rulership, and they're really, they want systems in place, they want to really, but you do really like them and you do have some really similar ideas around something. You might bring in a generator because then the generator would come in and sort of rectify the situation. That's one example of how that might work. And will help to dispel the bitterness. Again, it's not so much that we don't want you to experience the bitterness, but if you are experiencing bitterness, in long spurts and over a lot of time, then that really means that there's a major flaw with the situation. And then you can start to get really smart, almost like you might use a feng shui cure or something like that to bring in energy in a different way so that it can make the situation more harmonious. Or, you just step away. Projectors can be really good at stepping away, and that can be very healthy for them. But we just always want to be really clear around, is it a healthy stepping away, or is it, the bitterness has taken over and then it's a debilitating, unhealthy movement away from a specific situation. Bitterness. And I would say that, when you're in a situation, just kind of taking this into the Ayurvedic realm, even bitter foods can be very helpful to you. Like if you're really stewing on a situation and you just can't get any clarity, bringing in astringent bitter foods could be something that will just kind of move you forward in a real energetic, but I don't even know what the word would be in English, material. It's like Stoff in German. It's like a very like physical way also. So using those, I mean, in a way, yes, orange juice is sweet, but I can kind of see how orange juice is your helper, right? Because there's also that bitterness of the fruit, of a citrus fruit that is, probably a little bit of a helper to you. So I nerd out on that, especially because I've studied Ayurvedic and, Eastern medicine. And so, looking at this in a really broad way around like, oh, how could we use those strategies to help us with this could be helpful. And certainly food, herbs, as medicine, etc., can be helpful. So dandelion, things that are going to move the liver and help support the liver. And then, being aware, especially for projectors who are just getting this information, really being aware around, that they may have this bitterness energy sort of built up, especially in the liver, and these things can be gentle helpers to move that bitterness through with the energy, of bitter. Even Swedish bitters, I would recommend to a lot of my projectors. It seems to be very helpful. Just keep that liver moving.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love that part about using the bitter aspects to kind of work through that. Yeah, who knows about the orange juice? Maybe that is why I'm so drawn to it. That's a good. But
Yeah.
I have certainly noticed that theme showing up in my life when it feels like there needs to be some kind of a change, that I will just feel that kind of like energetic shift into that space. And oftentimes that is a very helpful prompt to making some kind of change, whether that is me moving away or whether that is just changing something within the situation or having a conversation. Usually that's the best thing to do about any of those situations. It's just a conversation that hasn't been had. And so just prompting that, okay, like I may not really want to talk about this, they might not really want to talk about this, but we need to talk about this because I don't want to feel this weight anymore. I don't want to feel this sort of bitter aspect.
Right.
Sounds really helpful.
The stagnation of the bitterness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said moving away, even because that is sometimes what projectors have to do. If whoever you're having the conversation with, doesn't want to have that conversation with you, a projector really does need to be so careful of their open auric field. And oftentimes that will result in moving, like physically moving, to a different town or state, just to like clear the energy for the projector so that then they can start projecting in their healthy way if things haven't been aligned. And know that even moving, you probably already know this deep in your bones, but even being in a room, like if you're at a party or at a gathering or whatever, and it's something isn't feeling right, literally moving your auric field away from what's not feeling right is the healthiest thing for a projector. Next, we'll go into the the profile. And so the profile you'll see here, it's sort of like, oh, what's this? What does this even mean? So there are a number of different profiles in human design, and these numbers stand for different types of the profile. Everybody has two profile numbers, and one is seen as more of a conscious personality trait that you came in with, and one is seen as something that tends to be more unconscious. And the profile that you've got, the 1-3, is so beautiful because basically what you are is a conscious personality and investigator. And that really is going to be how I show up, how I'm in situations, how is my personality sort of projected out, and then also how am I received by people. And the investigator is a beautiful energy. It's basically the researcher. It's somebody who looks into things very deeply. They hear about things, but even if they seem sort of lackadaisical or easygoing, they actually always study things before they give it their stamp of approval. They take some time to deeply get to know something. And these are what the renowned researchers are a lot of the times. It's just a capacity to really want to focus on something and not just sort of say things out of the blue or, oh, I studied that for 20 minutes. It's like, no, I'm literally, like gonna study this for forever. And you probably will, And I'm also an investigator, and it's an interesting life because you have so much to do. An investigator oftentimes will have like 30 books open, that they're reading, all kinds of information. I have like 200 tabs open on my computer. It's just a ton of information that you're constantly sifting through and then fine tuning and deciding, okay, do I want to study that? How far do I want to study that? And we are really helpful to society because, especially right now, because we're really looking deeply at things instead of just the real surface. And that can give a lot of insight to people that have been raised in the society that are just numbed and overwhelmed and traumatized, that just literally do not have the capacity to go down these rabbit holes and do the research. I can say that for myself, for my friends, family, and my clients especially, that I'm always, as the investigator, doing the research and then bringing it back to them and giving them the snippets that they can handle as they deepen their experience or knowledge about something. It can be a little tricky for investigators because you're meant to go deeper into information, and like it never ends. Like the deep depth just keeps going deeper, right? So right at the heart, maybe there's an ending point, both an ending and starting point, right? But it can be crazy making to feel the weight of the responsibility to do this research. And when I do come across investigators in my readings, oftentimes those are people that are very dedicated to things, often scientists, people, doctors, people like that, but they're so exhausted and their brains are just so full that they have a lot of monkey mind going on. And so that's something to be really thoughtful around. And, the grounding practice, these more material ways that the body, not here, you've got the bitterness, the projector, you have this ability for the bitterness to kind of take over, and then you go up into the ethereal realm, and we want something to come in and ground the profile, right? So that investigator needs grounding, and that can look like literally grounding while you're taking tests. I'm saying this also just from the viewpoint of younger people, helping them buying grounding shoes for kids to really help them get by in this world. Even having stones or things that they can hold that will really help the investigator sort of ground all that information that's flying around. I think it's even worse right now because of we're having so much we have the world is our oyster as far as information, and so anything that you can do to do that will be helpful. Does that sound true for you?
Oh yeah. I don't recommend grounding by touching the bare earth as often as I do, because it's not something that I've found just
Yeah.
incredibly beneficial. And I'll notice when I'll spend, like when I was in Dallas or spent more time where it was colder out or I didn't have as much contact with the bare ground, I would feel that sort of intensity start to build up, my ability to still my mind and to find that space of peace became much more difficult to do. And as soon as I get outside in nature and start to contact the ground, all of that just goes away and I'm able to get back into that space of peace. And so it's, that's why I talk about it so much, because it's so helpful to me. I cannot stress enough how helpful it is. And I know it's helpful to everybody to some degree or another, but especially for me and how I operate, just having that intentional practice where I put my bare feet on the ground, or lay on the ground. Like that's what I've loved doing recently, is going through Darth Vader's breathing exercises, going through those intentional breathing, but laying on the ground. So I'm grounding for that whole duration of doing that breathing. I'm getting the sun during that time too. And every ounce of that just really helps me to stay in that space of, I'm a very calm person, but I do have a lot going on up here at times when I'm not in that grounded state. And so that just helps to facilitate that calmness at all times. So yeah, very much so. I wear Earth Runners, which are grounding shoes. I can't recommend it enough. I actually just ordered some grounding pads that I'm going to start using while I sleep as well, just to have that additional boost during that time. But it's so important that we all do that. But it makes total sense why I've always been drawn to that aspect, and having that space to find that sort of just dispelling of all that.
Right. It may be a smidge more important to you or more helpful to you because of, you know, the snowflake that we're starting to see here. You've got the projector, which is living up there too, needs the grounding. You've got the weight of the rulership, which is quite an etheric energy that also needs the grounding. And then you have this like incredible investigator energy that needs that grounding too. Yeah, I've used the ones the grounding cords that there's a yoga one that just like you can put around your wrist or ankle. I use that a lot when I work on people because it's an easy way. You can clean them easily, etc. But I do have to say, when I first got into grounding, when my son was a baby, I got one of those and it was the biggest gift. I would slip it on him when he was upset. And within literally like 15 seconds, he would just fall asleep. And he was, you know, that projector energy just needed that so hardcore. And he was the same way. Like he would just mellow out so much as soon as we would get outside on the earth. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So thinking about this for, you know, other projectors that are hearing this, you know, to use real material things like smelling peppermint, you know, have these little things, something that really is easy to ground, because not, you know, some of us are in Alaska, some of us, you know, are in situations where we aren't, you know, it's not like we're going to step outside maybe and put our feet on the earth. And so can you have these things in place that will be very material and sort of help bring you down and ground you so that you can focus on what's happening, whether you're investigating it, you know, or you're having this issue as a projector or whatever it is that's going on in your profile. But yeah, I can see why it might be a little bit more important for you than others. I think it's helpful for others, but for you, it's definitely, you know, I can see why the gospel of grounding is something that you share often. So let's talk a little bit more about the third line in your profile, which is the martyr. And these words, there are some other profile things that maybe some people don't think are as great because of the wording in them. Martyr might be one, but in our realm, in the human design realm, it doesn't really have that negative connotation. Certainly that can be a way that it comes out in an immature aspect, but in general, we're thinking of a martyr in a very neutral way. And this is what's more in the subconscious. It's often something that becomes a little bit more prevalent as we get older and mature. So it'll sort of shine out maybe more brightly as you move forward in your years. And it's a very experiential line. So the martyr is an energy that really they have to try everything. And then they sort of, the only way that they're going to learn is by trying it. You could try to tell them something, but they're just not going to hear it or learn from it the way that they will if they create the situation, see what happens, and try. So that can be, again, like if you're a child and, you know, this can be challenging for a parent. And, you know, and it's actually very challenging for the martyr themselves because they want to do good in the world, just like the higher aspect of the archetype of a martyr. It's like you really want to do amazing things for this world. You want to be right and good and true and show up in that way. And the fact that your energetics are so experiential, especially to an investigator, right, can be a little bit frustrating, but there's real beauty in it too, because it brings a lot of knowledge based on the things that you've learned throughout your life into that investigator conscious line, and that just bolsters really what you can teach or what's going to shine through. um you definitely want to be very wise around uh working hmm, with not taking on loads of things and not showing up in, again, the bitterness. So for you, it'd be kind of doubled, right? Highlighted here, because you have the possibility of bitterness coming up, and then you have the possibility of an unhealthy martyrdom in your reality. So just always, again, coming back to center and really checking, am I staying true to my experiences and what I know, and can I not take things so personally if other people are not willing to go the way that I know is right for me. And then again, moving them out of your space as a projector is going to be very kind.
Just want to share some really kind comments that you're getting. So Swinover says, Lila, you are a natural teacher with this topic, and your voice on Reno's channel always brings soothe. And then Rebluey says, Lila's energy is beautiful. I've been vibrating this whole time. It's a very cool experience. So you're getting lots of love.
Well, gracias, amigos. Thank you. That's very sweet. Nice. I appreciate that. So really thinking about the martyr energy, I'm curious as to, if you want to say anything else about the profile in general, anything you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it has shown up in just as you've described it, of like, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. I've got to try it. I've got to figure it out myself. I've got to go through this experience, and and that's not always helpful. I mean, it is always helpful because I that's how I gain the best level of understanding. But sometimes it's not perceived by lots of other people as that same sort of thing too, because a lot of times it'll come across of like, I don't listen to anybody, or I don't care what anybody else says. And this also plays into my inner authority of self-projected, because one thing that I've learned about that inner authority that Lila didn't really mention was that I need to verbalize things, but I don't always need to have a response. And sometimes I'll ask a question, but I don't even really need you to respond any which way, nor do I need your answer to have any indication on what it is that I do next. I just need to hear myself ask the question. And so
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That is a piece of the self-projected inner authority that's so important.
Yeah, and so having both those pieces of always needing to do things myself and not necessarily needing anyone's input to make a decision, but I need to verbalize it. So it's like if people don't know me well, I can really come across as someone who just doesn't give a shit about what anybody else thinks, And so
Yeah.
it does, which is not true. I love everyone's perspective. I'm just not bound by it. I love having more bits of information. That's where my investigator comes up. I love having information presented to me, but at the end of the day, I am going to go my own way. I'm going to figure it out myself. I'm going to try it myself, and I really need to do that. I really need to chew on things in order to go through it. So that trial and error aspect it has been really helpful for me, because it's allowed my experiences to become so firm to where when I do speak on things, it's like I don't speak on things because I'm doubtful or skeptical. If I am not sure, then I'm very clear on that, and it's like, oh, I don't really know in that regard. But things that I do know, I'm like, no, I've been through this. I know what this is like. I see where this is, and even just talking generally about the work that we talk about, just this shedding weight so that we can refine our connection with God. because I've done that enough to see the beautiful effects that that's had in my life, that when I speak on these things, it's annoying, like it's getting out of this victim mentality and stepping into that space of empowerment. The gifts are just so beautiful in every single moment. But I had to go through some learning experiences to realize that, I had to get myself out of that victim mentality. I had to go through these moments where I, like, felt, oh, poor pitiful me, or do whatever else, and I needed to have that. And so just having that healthy approach to making mistakes. I don't even consider any of the things that have happened to me as mistakes, because they're all just helpful mechanisms that I needed to go through in order to get to where I am today. And so having that perspective and that level of, the times that I do this, and I know this is helpful for everybody, because this perspective of gratitude of through all experiences, it really does help to transcend every experience. So we're not viewing anything as a failure. But because I've done that enough in my life, I'm able to bring that kind of experience forward and say, and show that, like, okay, like, even if I went through something that was like bad, like, even if I went through something that was unpleasant or uncomfortable, I still cherish that experience, and I wouldn't do it any other way. I'm so grateful that I went through that, so that I could have this experience, so I can add that as a layer of myself and get to where I am today. So it does, like, having, again, not really having any concept of this until starting to come into human design. But once I realized that, it's like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense of why I needed to go through all these different things to have the direct experience, not taking it from anybody else. Like, while I love information as part of, again, I'm my investigator, I love the information, but then I've got to go try it. Then I've got to go do it
Right.
myself. And then I've got to go see how it works. And while this is my unconscious aspect, this did take a little bit longer to realize. This wasn't something that was quite as clear. But now the more that I am starting to uncover this, it's like, oh, that makes total sense why I operate this way. And that's why I do this all the time. So yeah, it's spot on.
So cool. Yeah, exactly. And, as another investigator, I have it on the unconscious line, and I'm not a martyr. And so I don't have that experiential line. So it's just interesting as one investigator talking to another investigator to hear that, because for me, that hasn't really been necessarily part of my journey. And it's kind of cool, to just see, oh, this is the way that it's shown up in this other snowflake here, and how different it can be, how similar we are in that realm, but then also how different we are. And exactly, if you have all these other types especially, and other snowflakes coming in and saying, like, oh, you fucked up because you should have made that mistake, or you shouldn't have made that mistake, you're in such a good place because you have that internal knowing, self-projected inner authority, and these other support systems in your chart to give you that strength through that. Whereas another projector, in fact, most probably other projectors, wouldn't really have that. And it can be, a martyr can be really hard on themselves, because again, they want to do this, they want to believe in the good, they're here for it's the night, just like the goodly godly knighted path. And then things don't always go that way. It takes a lot of work to become a knight, I hear. There's a whole process involved. So this is definitely something that, an example of when we understand something in this way, we just can stop and take a breath and not be so hard on what our life appears to be to others or to ourselves, and be like, okay, yeah, and I love you're so clear, because you've already learned, like, each of those things was not a failure. It was just something, it was experience that has taught me so much. And so moving from that, old school way of thinking of, like, win, lose, or whatever, the duality of that reality, to this win-win, like, it's a win, whatever happens to us. And most people's energies and problems, are very dictated by that internal assessment of I fucked up and that led to my terrible, challenging life right now, whatever that looks like, right? And I mean, I would say in my experience, that is a really big player in most people's mental health, emotional health, physical health. So, to be able to have that awareness is, such a gift for all of us. And, I will say as a martyr, you are also showing up and saying like, I'm freaking gonna do the thing, and I bow down to that in you. It's something I've always appreciated about you and other people like you, Charlie, others. It's like, we need that energy to come in and say like, just try it, like, water fast, this, that, or the other, like, just see it and like do it and show up as best you can. If you stumble, if you don't feel comfortable talking on a live, if you like, whatever the story is of all of us and our precious little experiences of ourselves, like if we could just let that go, we can actually start to show up and interact with each other in a way that's so fulfilling. And I think that's why so many people are interested in what you have to say, what Charlie has to say. It's like, each of us are so important, and we need to like get beyond all of that and like show up. But it can be a little like, it can rub against our edges because we see how amazing and knightly a martyr can be, and then we self-judge. So I would guess that that's played itself out a little bit in some of the situations that you've been in, maybe even recently, and, we want to really acknowledge that and work with that and, bless them, on their way around friction or imagined insult or any of those things, because oftentimes it's not going to, especially in your situation with this chart, it is really not you most of the time that somebody is getting irritated by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well
it's
said.
not personal. Yeah.
Yeah, and going to the 4 agreements and not taking anything personally, it does apply to anyone, anywhere. But it makes sense why I have such an influence from this perspective, so that I can show up and demonstrate that, so I can show what that's like, so I can rub people the wrong way that need to be rubbed the wrong way, and demonstrate whatever it needs to be to say, you know what, I'm not here to be everybody's friend. If people don't like me, that's okay. Like, whatever, we're just moving about in this space, and I don't need to be affected by that, but I'm willing to be that representation as the martyr, to say, hey, like, I'll take those slings and arrows, like I'll be that, I'll take those hits, and I'll show what it's like to let that, water off the duck's back. Like, I'll let it roll off my shoulders. It's no big deal, no big thing to me. But it has taken a lot of work to get to this space. It's taken a lot of shadow work to let go of these tethers, to where somebody's words or somebody's opinions or somebody's perspective, and before, I would take it a lot harder. It would be a lot harder to deal with, and it would be a lot longer before I could come and have that courage to show up and be who I am. So every single step is just continuing to step into this this role of showing up just as I am, and not being afraid to show up, so that we can all show up exactly as we are, so we can all be the best, brightest versions of ourselves, and not be afraid of the repercussions. Because as soon as we let go of those fears, then they don't exist anymore. Then anyone who tries to wield that power over anybody else, it doesn't work, and then they just become an asshole off in the corner by themselves. And it's like, okay, well, you get to be an asshole over there all you want to, but you're not affecting anybody, you're not hurting anybody, and we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep doing this, because it's amazing. It's amazing to live life free.
Yeah.
To not be
Such a
bound.
gift.
Yeah, to not be bound by someone else's perspective. It's truly so incredible.
Yeah, and the caring is built in there already. You obviously care about everybody with that right angle cross of rulership, with projector reality, with the 1 and the 3. It's like, it's built in. This is who you are. They're, you know, it's just there. And so how can it shine forth and spur people into that place? When you said that, you know, I was like, yeah, welcome to the life of a left angle juxtaposition of shock. You know, it's like, oh God, please, can I just like have a normal week or whatever, where I'm not, you know, having this rub somebody, you know, it's like you love me or you hate me sometimes. And the same people can love and hate, right? You know, but yeah, I get it. And you know, but the martyr is just such a gift, and it just makes so much sense as far as where my experience of where you are at in this group, in this realm, is, you know, is in alignment with that, because it's like you need to know your shit, but also you need to be really, really dedicated to something, and then affect other people so that they can step into the fullness of who they are and not feel so self-critical that they can't participate. You know, it's like Operation Spread the Light. Like we're all the lights. You know, it's not like, oh, this one light comes in and shines on everything. It's like, if that's the case, then oh, it's only shining on that part of the room, or oh, it's only shining on that part of the room. It's like, if we're all shining, we're illuminating the entire room, you know. So let's come in and be moved. And you know, a martyr does that really well, really well. And so I'm grateful to you for that, and all martyrs that I work with, because it's a tricky energy, but it's also so beautiful and such a gift to us, us people, us beings here in this realm. I wanted to say a couple more things. I figure that probably some people are looking at this little picture and they're sort of like, whoa, okay, what's going on there? And I'm just going to speak to this briefly, because this, you know, again, we could go on for hours explaining this. So I'm just going to kind of quickly clarify what's going on here, and then we can, you know, we can always do more work with that. But when you're looking at what's called the body graph, it's called the body graph. So it is, you have what's called these motors. It's all these different shapes that are here. These are all called motors, and you'll see some of them are white and some of them are colored. And this is going to be different for every person that looks. So maybe I could find, again, Justin's is pretty rare, but it would probably be pretty unlikely that I could find many people with this exact body graph, but it just depends on each person's body graph. So when I'm looking at this, I'm basically looking at the motors. They can be equated to the chakras in a certain way, like you know, you basically have the root chakra kind of moving up to the head, right? So that movement and line of energy is certainly there, but we look at them more in a mechanical sense, and we call them motors. When they have a color, that's what's called a defined motor. And when they're white, that's called an undefined motor. And the defined motor, which is colored, is often, it is a place where energy moves through your sort of electrical diagram here, or we could say magnetic diagram, whatever's moving your energy, right? And where it's white and undefined, it's not that you don't move energy there, but it's actually done in a different way, where you're basically reflecting back, and you need another energy to come in and reflect back. And then when that happens, it sort of fills that motor up and defines it. Okay, so we all have some that are filled in, some that are white for the most part. And we want to, where we can, look at the way that the motors that it's moving in and the motors that it's less likely to move in without help. And for you, you have these two that are filled in. And then this is called the G, the diamond at the center. And then the one above it is called the throat motor. And for you, those two are moved in. So when people are filled in, I'm sorry. So when people have these filled in, they tend to move energy through those areas. And each of these areas processes and works with, you know, different attributes or traits, or, you know, energetic systems in a way. So you have a G that's defined, and the defined G is definitely going to be something that resonates and is part of, basically. This is the written part of what we're looking at over here that is drawn or illustrated, right? So this is just a different way of looking at the same information. So your G being defined here means that you have a strong sense of self, a defined will in a way, and that in general, you're mostly going to be kind of like, I know what's up for me, what feels right for me, and this is the way the energy moves through in that way. So that sometimes may not align with other people who also have a defined G, if that makes sense. It can become a little combative because you have energy moving there and they do too. And so oftentimes when we're looking at that, like in a relationship, there may be like, oh, two people that are in love, but they both want to live in different areas for very specific reasons, right? Or, you know, people that meet, star-crossed lovers that meet on a trip to Europe, but one lives in Yugoslavia and the other one lives in America, or whatever the story is, right? And so it's very foundational. It has a lot to do with like where you are in time and space as far as yourself. The one above it that's defined is the throat center, and we all know this to be true. You're very good at verbalizing, moving energy through the throat motor and really helping it be something that can support you and support others. So it's just perfect that you do a lot of podcasts and, you know, a lot of talking with people. You have a way of metabolizing information and then projecting it out, especially through your voice. But again, if somebody else has a defined throat, so for instance, I have a defined throat and we can have these amazing conversations, but sometimes we talk at the same time because we both have the energy moving through there. So it can sometimes not work well together, or sometimes it can be really great because you have these two people with defined throats and they can have a really inspiring, fun, deep conversation like this, right? So it's not always if you know, it doesn't always rub up against each other in a negative way necessarily, but it's something to be mindful for or mindful about. And when we're looking at, say, you know, compatibility between different energies, we might want to look at, are these motors working well together, or are there issues that are being created because these motors are both defined in these two people, and so therefore there's a little bit too much energy moving through there. And it's not that you wouldn't necessarily continue the conversation, quote unquote, you know, with the person or whatever it is, but you would want to be really mindful about that because it can sometimes create some friction. Now you have a lot of undefined motors and those areas and feeling centers, and what's going to happen is those areas are going to be sort of magnetically filled in and nicely massaged open by other people that are coming into your existence. So, you know, somebody else may have 6 of those filled in and only 2 undefined. It's very dependent on each person's chart. So you're going to want to be thoughtful around what this could look like. For instance, because you have these undefined, is that, for instance, down in the root and sacral chakra, somebody may come in who's a generator would move energy through those areas, and that would really help ground and energize you to a certain extent to then move energy up through those two bottom centers, through the G, which is defined, up through the throat, and then out through the mouth or out through the head with very deep esoteric thought or wonderful conversation, verbal exchanges, etc. So this is the way that the undefined centers can be stimulated by other people in a very synergistic way. That ties into the last thing that I want to talk about, which is over here. It says definition, single definition. I'm gonna kind of explain this in layman's terms, which I made up. So I don't know if I'm a layman or not, but hey. So basically I look at this as channels that have these lines that are between the different motors. I look at them as like channels that have been dug. Say you were building a house or some type of a compound and you needed to hopefully you won't be really using electrical line, but this definitely translates to magnetic energy movement, to energy movement and containment, right? So say you're having to dig a channel. For simplification purposes, I'm going to imagine a line, okay? So like an electrical line, but take that and then it can be used in other ways. But these paths between what's called the gates, that's all these numbers in here. These paths, you'll see some of them are black, some of them are red, some of them are striped, some of them are white, some of them are halfway through, some of them are halfway here, but then not all the way here, etc., etc. And I think, yeah, you have one pathway, this channel right here that is all the way through. Okay, so is that correct? Yeah, the rest of them. So if you have energetic wires and say a tunnel or a ditch, a channel that's been dug, and then you were to lay the wire, okay, from one motor to the other motor, but just imagine the channel and then the wire, and then say you only had the wire half of the way. That is a way of explaining what's happening, for instance, here. So where you have half black and then you have this undefined, it's almost as if the wire has been laid, but only part of the way, or maybe it's laid all the way, but there's something right here, like a conductor or something, that isn't conducting, that isn't allowing it to move. And I'm not an electrician, so I don't know the proper terminology, but I think you get my drift. So this is what we're looking for when we're looking at the definitions. Everybody has different types of definitions, and you have what's called the single definition. So you have the ability to move energy through your chart in a way that is not so dependent on other people coming in and completing the electrical movement through the rest of the channel. And that is, again, can sort of be seen as an aloof state, very, very highly independent state, because again, it's like you just know, you move the energy, you make the decisions for yourself. That's how it is. And other people don't have that. They may have a triple split definition, for instance, where they're actually very dependent on other people coming in and having this exact half of this channel here moving energy so that they can connect up with them and then move the energy through the centers and get work done. Make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there are going to be people, like, if you're somebody who is like, oh gosh, I really need to talk to my therapist or my sister or my mom or whatever the story is, that's probably actually really built into your design. And other people don't need to do that. They don't necessarily need anybody else to come in and move the energy for them. So this is another way that the snowflake is so individual. And you can imagine there, you see all these numbers, these are all gates, all of these lines mean things. And like, for instance, you have gate 52. Gate 52 is around stillness. It's called Still Mountain Gate. And that is just, for example, I'm not going to go too into this because this is something that is usually explained a little bit down the road. And we're trying to keep this simple so everybody can follow it and just start to metabolize all this information. But the Still Mountain Gate is a gate that is all about somebody who needs stillness, probably out in nature, grounding, etc. So again, we're seeing that in your chart where this is just so important for you. And also when that energy is moving through that gate, you have an incredible ability to maintain and project out the stillness for other people. Be that stillness, even as you're talking, that you're just sitting and listening, being still. And yes, it has to do with like, is your mouth moving or not, or, what's going on, but actually it's actually more energetic. People are aware when you're still and listening and taking in and metabolizing and alchemizing what's going on. And that's a real gift for them. So each of these channels, pathways really do have so much more information that you can go into. And then what you may be looking, well, let's put it this way, hoping to align with to create the completion of certain projects, tasks, or realities, right? So somebody else may come in and really need that Still Mountain Gate, somebody who has that Still Mountain Gate defined so that they can have their own personal healing or experience that catapults them, forward along their path. So this has really been built into your design to be this type of person. So again, we want to be really aware that just because Justin has the single definition and that's really true for him, that's not true for everybody. And all of those are perfectly beautiful and designed that way, built that way, just like a computer circuitry board around what you want that computer to do in a beautiful, I feel, divine way to do what you're here to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It just becomes so much more clear that all of these components structured together in this unique way gives us all a different sort of, we're all different puzzle pieces. And the whole point is just to find, where does my puzzle piece fit into this large, huge, beautiful puzzle that we're creating? And so I'm not going to sit here and compare my puzzle piece to someone else's puzzle piece and say, why is my puzzle piece not shaped like that puzzle piece? Well, because my puzzle piece is not made for that hole that the puzzle piece fits in. And so we're all made to fit exactly where we need to go. And the whole idea is just to use these kind of tools and really just finding that space to go within so that it becomes a lot more clear. Like these are helpful tools to find that aspect. But we get all this just through experience and being still, being observant, listening, taking in what is happening around us. This whole natural creation is designed to stimulate us into our highest self, regardless. It's designed to give us these experiences so that we're always moved towards our space of highest potential. So naturally we'll find these, but you're here listening to this conversation now because you're being guided to have another tool in your tool belt to be able to show up and be the puzzle piece that you're meant to be, because you can't do it any other way, and we shouldn't. This is we're the unique aspect of self, and we're made exactly to do what we're here to do, and be the best versions of that.
Yeah, and we need you, so if if you can understand these things and start working with this and self-educate yourself or get help understanding it if you need it, however it is that your body and brain learns, like we need, I mean, I'm doing this because I want to share this because it's such a gift for people to understand this, because then they can start to, they can move on from the like more mechanical, like, does this fit together? Is the circuitry working? And like, no, like what's beyond the circuitry running the magnetism correctly, right? Like there's a whole other job out here that's meant to be, happening. And why wouldn't I be, going and that's what's important to me, so it's like for me, I got, and I'm still, I mean, it'll probably be a lifelong, maybe lifelongs, I don't know, it depends on what happens here, but it's like, it'll be a process, but I do feel like understanding that, seeing in my triple definition and my single definition and my all of these things, it's just like, shoo, whoa, that just catapulted me so much more forward, so much more quickly and with such grace and ease, so that I'm not just sitting here like, oh wait, am I trying to fit a carburetor from a Porsche into my Ford, program situation here, mechanical design here that, I want to be driving through this experience, right? So I hope that can be something that people can take away from it and feel really empowered. Yes, it's beautiful if you can do a reading with anybody, but also be really, be open. There's so much information and you really can get a ton of information on your own and start educating yourself. And if you're curious, hey, what's gate 52? There's so many ways. And I wanted to mention this briefly. Ra, who channeled the information and created human design and created the Jovian archive, there's a wonderful free book that you can get in PDF form that is some of what we've talked about today and a ton of other information. If someone's really interested in this, that's a good place to start. You can go there, Jovian, Jovain archive, and then you can get that information. And that's you could read that. The other thing is that he actually has an entire library of his teachings. And right now you do pay a nominal fee. I feel like it's very worth it, but you can study straight from him. And there's some of his things are on YouTube, etc. But you really can study straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And, I love his stuff. I think he's a poet and a visionary, and I do really love to listen to him. There's a certain way that his words and timbre of his voice, etc., fall in my ears that is just very beautiful. And I also love a ton of other people to get information from. So, whatever works for you, again, just like pick out what's working for you and let that catapult you forward so that you can first educate yourself better and then start to understand the people around you in your life. It's going to be such a gift to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, feel free to dive into any area of these things to go into further depth. You just really have to research whatever it is, whether this split definition or just these terms. You can just type into a search engine, type into YouTube, wherever, and it will pop up quite a bit of information that you can find. Getting into the connecting gates and how those kind of aspects showed up. It's all so fascinating. And like Lila said, there's such a depth to it that you really can just continue going into to just learn more ways that, to me, everything that I've learned has made a lot of sense. I mean, there hasn't been one thing that I've come across where it's just like, no, I reject that entirely. Everything has fit to some degree or another, or I've seen some sort of experiential way where I've maybe transmuted, that particular aspect into a higher version of it. But that's the cool thing about it, is there's always kind of a growth area within how these things show up. There's the immature aspect, and then there's the sort of maturing aspect involving them. So so yeah, it's all really exciting stuff, and I'm really glad that we were able to go through this today. And I continually learn more and more stuff about myself when I go through these kind of things. So I really want to give a big thank you to you, Lila, for all the time that you spend doing this, and all the care that you pour into this. I mean, people just have been loving on you in the chat, and just the way that you show up and have this ability to share this kind of information, and the passion that you do just exude with, and all that you speak about. It shows a lot of work. It shows a lot of uh it shows a lot of just dedication to this beautiful way. And I will say that, this is just one tiny little aspect of this brilliant woman, and how much
Oh,
she knows, and how much she has to offer, because she really does. She's so dedicated to everything that she learns about, and she shows up in all the different ways. So we've really enjoyed having her chime in to the different chats, especially on Healing is a Feeling, on our weekly kind of like health check-in with everybody. But it's great to have these kind of things in our repertoire, so that we can, just further know about ourselves, and figure all this out. This is a game. This is a scavenger hunt game that we're playing with ourselves. We scattered ourselves into infinite number of pieces, and now we're trying to put the pieces back together again and find ourselves once more. And it's fun. It can be fun.
yeah,
It
it's
can be
fun.
daunting.
It's so
It can,
fun.
yeah, it can be daunting, of course, when we look at it from a certain perspective. But when we really get out of that victim mindset and get into this space of like, this experience is here for us to learn, and for us to
Yeah,
grow.
it's so beautiful. And, you know, nerding out on this and then being able to fine tune it. Like, for instance, even looking at the gates, there's so much. Like, sometimes I work with these charts, and I also work a little bit with astrocartography, which is the ley lines of the realm, and, where we were born, etc. And that is very fascinating. And again, I was very skeptical of it like 30 years ago, and it's taken me, literally 22 years, I would say, of like checking and comparing people's experiences and my own experiences, blah, 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 all of this stuff, researching it and sort of being like, oh, wait, I want to hear, how was that? And it, at this point, I have to say I'm pretty convinced. I just keep seeing it show up, and same with human design. But it's so cool because you can look at like very specific things, like your human design chart. For instance, if you want to start a business with somebody, if you're going to marry somebody, I mean, hey, if you have kids, like how can all these charts work together in a more harmonious way? If I'm a generator that benefits by sleeping with other generators, but I have a manifestor partner who needs to sleep alone, that's something that's pretty important for people to know when they're going to be involved with each other. But also, like, the aspects, you could do a whole, many readings on just looking at all of this information as far as how it affects you physically, and how to best take care of yourself, for instance, with your Ayurvedic traits, and the positions of your human design, and really nerd out on what are the things, foods, practices, things like that, because it's going to be different for different people depending on which of those pathways, channels they have activated or not, right? You could look at this and say, like, okay, I want to look at, for instance, at somebody maybe who's just starting their life, graduating, and becoming a young adult, and how can this information be used so that they can have, again, success is an interesting word, right? Because success can mean many things, but just how they can move forward in a way that's going to ultimately benefit them and be as kind as possible when that's possible. There are many, we didn't really get into this, but there are some profiles that are really meant to go through trial and error and have, a lot of challenges. For instance, the role model is one of the personality types, and they really are challenged basically for like the first 30 years of their life through the Saturn return time. And, that is built in. Like, that makes somebody going through that much trial and tribulation makes an incredible role model down the road, right? So it's like some of these things do have to happen and are meant to happen in, you know, God's plan. All of the things are meant to happen in God's plan, right? But God's plan is that some people do have these trials and tribulations because it's alchemizing you into being this person that is so beautiful and can give to the community the way that a role model needs to later in life. I think that our friend John might have been a role model, if I'm remembering correctly. I did look at his chart sometime. So that's the other thing. It's so fun to look at other people's charts, even if you don't know them, but you're kind of curious, like, oh, I've experienced this person. I'm so curious about, you know, what their chart might look like, and why do these certain behaviors or energies about them captivate me. So anyways, yeah, I loved being here. It literally felt like 22 minutes. And thanks everybody for participating in the call. I hope we can do more things like this. My
Yeah,
pleasure.
absolutely. Would love to have you back, and we can go further deeper into human design, or pick your brain on all the other wealth of knowledge that you have, because you have a lot to share. And so I'm really grateful that you chose to be here and to show up as you are, because it's a gift to us all. So thank you, Lila. You're a treasure.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you guys all enjoyed this today. This was a wonderful experience. You know, again, take this not as something to restrict you, but as something that you can find to elevate you in ways where it can, and really take ownership of the process and looking through it. And if you want to have somebody like Lila go through your chart in a detailed way like this, her contact information is in the show notes. So feel free to email her or message her on Telegram, and set something like that up. You know, I don't think she has any sort of rigid system with it, but just in the same sort of way, just honoring the energetic exchange in some capacity or another, you know, just to show that this does take a lot of time and effort to do. And while she loves to do it, it's always wonderful to reciprocate that energy in some form or another. So that's all that I'd request in that space. But thank you so much, Lila, for your time and your energy spent here. It's been such a joy to have you. And yeah, thank you everybody else for being here. I love you guys, love you all, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I wanted to say one last thing. If people have, I don't know if people have been putting in questions, but if you have a burning question, we can compile a list and do another live if that's helpful. Or
Yeah.
really seriously, feel free. Like, I love this stuff. So, and not even about human design, like there's anything, rolfing, like whatever you want, like just message me. I will like share as much information with you as possible, because I'm, you know, I'm the investigator, so I got it here somewhere in one of these tabs or whatever. So yeah, feel free to message me. It's a delight to hear from people with questions about all of this.
Yeah, maybe we'll set up like a Q&A Telegram show sometime where people can just come with questions and ask them live, and we can just have a dialogue. That might be kind of fun.
Yeah,
Somebody
that'd be so fun.
somebody did just ask, if you don't know exact birthplace or birth time, how much does that affect the authenticity?
Yeah, great. So place is pretty important. We would do what's called rectifying a chart. So that can look a few different ways. If you can get as close as possible, that's important. And then at this point, we see that there's sort of a statistical probability that you're probably born pretty close to 9:30 a.m. So what we do is we start by putting 9:30 a.m. into the at the Jovian archive, and that will come up. It can be harder to rectify the chart if you don't know human design. So oftentimes if someone doesn't know that information, it's more helpful to have someone like me go in, because I can, you know, go through things and sort of help you compare and contrast, because sometimes it doesn't affect you at all, but sometimes the difference of a half hour or something will. So what we'll do is we'll go through, we'll look at what's coming up, and then we might you know, it depends on how much time you have. Sometimes I've rectified it by like 30-minute increments. A lot of people just will do 2 or 3 times within the 24-hour time cycle. So they might check it at like 9:30, 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. or something like that. And then you could just compare and contrast how much does it change the chart. Again, sometimes it won't at all. And then other times there might be subtle changes that then we would look more, at sort of questioning, interviewing the person and saying what feels more true to you. So in my experience, we've been able to really land on some very good charts for people that are probably quite correct and accurate. So that would be how you would do it yourself, though. Any other questions?
I'm sure there were a couple more in the chat, but they were it seems like everyone was helping each other out in the chat too, which is always really wonderful.
Yay! I can't wait to look.
Just going over their charts and yeah, but yeah, if you do have questions, feel free to send them to Lila, or you can send them to me and we can start compiling some, and maybe we'll do another show later on where we can just go over a bunch of questions and yeah, covering this kind of stuff, because there's a lot to uncover and a lot to go over.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks for your time too, Justin. And
yeah, no problem.
See you guys soon.
Yeah, take care, guys. Love everybody. Bye.
Love you guys. Bye.